Hello, thank you. Thank you for that introduction. Let me go ahead and start sharing my screen. Can you hear me and see my presentation? Okay. And if everyone can mute their, thanks, Julia. All right. So thank you. My name is Stephanie Yee, and I'm from the Division of Information Systems here at NSF. Thank you for joining our presentation on migrating proposal preparation and submission from FASTLane to Research.gov. Oh, sorry. So just to briefly introduce my role here, I'm the head of the operations and maintenance here at NSF, and I oversee the systems, the Research.gov system, FASTLane, grants.gov. So I'm the operations lead for that. There are other project managers here at NSF that primarily deal with the new development. So I work really closely with IT Help Central and also with the new development team. And this is my contact information in case someone wants to contact me directly. So today, this is the agenda. It's very similar to what I presented previously in FTP, but we will be giving you some updates. Just a brief overview of why we're doing this migration, highlight some of the key dates for you to keep in mind, advantages, and why use Research.gov earlier than when we will do the cutoff, where we are in terms of ramp up, and to discuss some of the most recent proposal enhancement highlights and provide a demo on those new enhancements, and also to reiterate some of the sections or things I'm seeing from the user community. So hello, Research.gov. Last year, there was an important notice that went out to NSF notifying users that NSF is doing more of a proactive step of moving our proposal submissions from FASTLane to Research.gov. I want to bring your attention to the date on the left-hand side. That important notice didn't have this date, but we're ready to share this date with you. We are targeting to move all proposal submission functionalities from FASTLane to Research.gov by December 31st, 2022. So that's coming up in fewer than 12 months. Right now, so we've been incrementally moving functionalities from FASTLane to Research.gov. As of now, approximately 70% of NSF's opportunities are eligible in Research.gov, and funding opportunities will specify whether or not the opportunity can be submitted there. So on the right-hand side is just a screenshot of a sample solicitation. This is 22541. And if you look under important information revision notes, you will notice a paragraph. We blew it up on the right-hand side that notifies you, hey, in support of the important notice 147, this proposal, proposal submitted in response to this solicitation must be prepared in Research.gov. So as you look at new opportunities and you're reviewing solicitations, just take a closer look at this paragraph and to see if that applies to your solicitation or not. So very quickly, why are we making this migration? FASTLane has been around since 1994. So just think about what you were doing in 1994. Maybe you were not around yet. That's a really long time. And to think about a system that's been around that long, it's outdated. The user interface is not up to modern standards. And to be honest, it's more and more complex, expensive, and difficult to maintain a system that old. So Research.gov is built on modernized architecture. And this is exciting because there's a lot of features that we want to implement in a proposal submission system that we just simply can't do in FASTLane. So, as I mentioned before, removing functionality incrementally. We have been doing this since 2018. We started with a basic research proposal, but now we are implementing more and more of the proposal submission types and proposal types. Just to note, this next to last bullet is, FASTLane is not just proposal submission. So FASTLane does include other functionalities on that page. We're not, the date December 2022 is not addressing those other modules. We're only talking about proposal submission. And just as a reminder, grants.gov will continue to be an option for people to prepare and submit NSF proposals. Okay, so how are we trying to prepare the community for this migration? So as I mentioned, we're being more proactive and being a little more aggressive in terms of moving over funding opportunities to Research.gov. We are actively meeting with each directorate, taking a closer look at their solicitations, anything that's in draft, what's coming up, and seeing if this is a candidate to be Research.gov, or can it be something that we can force people to use Research.gov. The idea is we don't want a situation where January 1st, 2023, right now our submission rates are hovering around 40%, which is great. When we first rolled out, it was at like a measly 1%. We want the percentages to go up. And the reason is we don't want a shock to the community. We don't want a situation where, over 50% of the community has not even looked at Research.gov and now they're forced to use it. We want this to be gradual. We want to hear feedback. We want our staff, our IT Central to also do this incrementally to not have such a shocking transition when that happens. We're continuously engaging NSF staff. So we are meeting with staff pretty regularly here at NSF just to show them what's going on so they can better answer your questions when you contact them. And we're trying to ramp up our training for internal and external communities. So if you go to the help guides in Research.gov, that is continuously being updated. We're adding new guides, we're adding new videos, so just keep taking a look at that. And also, in conjunction, we're updating, we're working very closely with policy just to make sure that the PAPG and our system are in sync. So this slide, I'll just go over some highlights, but this is something that was requested at previous conferences from administrators of, how do I, really quickly tell someone why they should use Research.gov. So here we are. Hands down, it's a better user experience. It's using modern, interface standardizations, flows, wizards that helps new users navigate much more easily than for Fastlane. There's immediate feedback for each proposal section versus Fastlane is a more of a, you work on it and then you find out at the end whether or not you're successful. Research.gov is more of a informing you what you need to fix as you upload. Faster document uploads has everyone experienced Fastlane. When you upload a document, it could take a couple minutes. If it's a large document, in Research.gov, it's almost instant. Compliance checking is a lot more extensive in Research.gov. We're checking almost double what Fastlane is checking. And also higher proposal submission quality. So this interests PIs a lot more than administrators, that image qualities are a lot better in Research.gov. And the reason is, in Fastlane, when you upload your documents, we are redistilling that. So what happens is, sometimes searchability gets impacted, when you search through the PDF, but most obviously are the images. The quality of the images are slightly impacted in Fastlane. In Research.gov, we don't touch that PDF. So all the image qualities are not altered. And also you can have a little bit of comfort of, fewer returns without reviews because we are checking more things. Okay. This one is just preparation tips. This is something that maybe not all people know, but I just want to reiterate this because it's really important in terms of preparing whether or not you're using Research.gov or Fastlane. So just remember, anytime a new solicitation comes, we have looked at it. And we have, talked and coordinated with the program officer to see if it's a Research.gov only. So always be on the lookout for that. And if an opportunity is a recurring one, so let's say there's a solicitation that happens every year, always take a look at it. It's most likely going to change after the deadline has passed. A reminder that program descriptions are supported in Research.gov. A lot of times I talk about solicitations, but there is program descriptions which follow the PAPG. They're not talked about as much, but there is a plan for us to start looking at that a little more heavily to see if we can start moving those as Research.gov only as well. We're not ready yet, but I'm hoping in the next 2 months you might start seeing that. The next couple bullets are just more of a technical things you should know. FastLane and Research.gov proposals are independent systems and they don't know of each other. So what that means is you cannot start a proposal in one system and transfer it to the other. If you have a separately submitted collaborative, all people have to create their proposal in the same system. You can't have some people in FastLane and some people in the other. The same goes for PFUs. So if you submit a proposal in FastLane, you have to perform a PFU in FastLane. Same goes for things that require letters of intent or prelim proposals. If you submit a letter of intent in FastLane, you should finish the full proposal in FastLane. And that is because when you are preparing the full proposals and it's required, the systems are not going to know if you submitted, the prelim or letter of intent in the other system. So just be aware that the systems are a little more self-contained. And the last takeaway here is, we get this question a lot. The proposals are evaluated the same way. The reviewers see the same proposal, it looks the same, so they're not going to be able to know whether or not you submit it through FastLane or Research.gov. So that's just something to keep in mind. All right, so this next slide is where we are and what's ahead. There's a lot of text on here, it's very small. I'm not going to go over this, but the takeaway here is this slide is what we show at every conference. And if you compare it to other slides, the column on the left gets bigger. So the column on the left are current capabilities that we have and implemented and the dates that we implemented those. So this is a good slide to kind of take a look at, can Research.gov support it? You can, scan this and take a look. But I want you to know that upcoming and future capabilities, that column is getting smaller. So there's a lot of things that are not quite in there yet. And let's see. Oh, sorry. I thought there was a slide that summarized them. So the things that we haven't put in there yet, just for you to know, are postdoc fellowships. There are specialized forms for some directorates. So those are EHR project data forms, the ability to select other secondary units of consideration. SBIR, STTR are not in there, and things like post-award action supplemental funding requests. So those are the high big ticket items that we haven't put in place yet, but everything else should be in there. I'm gonna pause here to see if there's any open questions before I talk about some of our recent enhancements.
Stephanie, can you talk about the relationship between grants.gov and research.gov?
Oh, sure. So for those who are grants.gov users, so right now, how proposals get into NSF from grants.gov hasn't changed. So if you submit a proposal in grants.gov and you have to do a PFU, for example, that proposal still lives in FastLane. So how that works is people submit their proposal in grants.gov, we do some processing on it, and it enters our system and it's living in the FastLane world. So when you need to do a PFU, make changes to that, or you want to see the status, you go to FastLane. There will be a point this calendar year where that will stop and the grants.gov proposal will live in research.gov. There's not a timeline for that yet, but as of today, January 2022, your grants.gov proposal is still living in a FastLane world. All right, thanks, Julia. Some highlights.
No other questions.
Okay, great. So for November release enhancement, this was a big one for us. This allowed us to make a lot more solicitations available in research.gov. So we have implemented prelim proposals and full proposals that require preliminaries. We also introduced 2 more proposal types, center and research infrastructure. The last bullet are project descriptions exceeding 15 pages. And what I mean by that are there are some solicitations that allow larger project descriptions. Prior to November, we were unable to accommodate that. It was a hard 15-page limit, but now those solicitations that have that deviation can be submitted in research.gov. So these next couple slides are screenshots of the new enhancements. I'm going to go over them probably not very long at all because I'll be showing them to you in a demo, but this will be useful if you have colleagues that were not on this call and you just want to show them, really quickly some of the screens. This is it. So we have our usual, boxes where you can prepare new things. And in there, we've added prelim proposals, and the same are updated in the other two boxes. We've introduced new proposal types. So those are now two new active radio buttons on the wizard for proposal types. And as I mentioned, project descriptions exceeding 15 pages, we're checking the solicitation requirements and enforcing the page limits that way. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to break from the presentation and go into the demo and actually show you some of these new features. And how this demo is going to work is not only am I going to show you the new features, but as I'm in there, I'm going to go over some of the same sections that I usually go through in conferences, but just, give you some updates or things that we have learned through usage that might help you in preparation. And Julie, I'm going to take a pause to just scan the questions. So remember to send your questions in the Q&A. Let's see.
So we don't have any additional, but while you get set up, I'm going to put the information about joining our system updates listserv. So anytime we make a change for any release, we always release communications there. So to stay in the know about Research.gov and about Fastlane, I'm going to put the information in the chat now. So please join our listserv if you're not already on this.
Okay. So there's a question about helpful error messages. And I'll go over that a little bit, the differences between error messages and warning messages. And thank you for the comment about it's not always specific. So we try to be as specific as possible, but definitely let us know in the feedback. So I'll show you that in a minute, where you can send anonymous feedback of things you think could be better or features you wish you would see in the system. And we do take a look at that. So we do try to be specific as much as possible. There are messages I think there could be room for improvement. Yes. And you mentioned people panicking, and I don't want people to panic. And so I will talk a little bit about warnings and when to panic and when to not panic. But warnings do not stop submissions. So I would recommend, if you are really tight on the deadline and that worries you, I would submit if it's a warning. Hard stops are hard stops. Those are, hard rules to follow in the PAPG. We're stopping you. Those are the ones that should concern you. So I'll talk a little bit about that. But yes, there are areas to improve with error messages, and I'm aware of that. And we are always looking to see how we can improve that. So I'm going to do a screen check. Julia, can you see my Research.gov screen?
Yes, we can.
All right. So one thing that the users or the community has requested from us is a demo environment, or an environment where people can look around the system, without creating a proposal in Research.gov. So in October 2020, we implemented a demo site or a training site for anyone with a valid NSF ID to be able to go in and impersonate a PI and experiment with the file uploads and see how this system works. So I'm logged in production as myself, and this is the desktop screen that everyone sees. You may not see all these options because I have more permissions than most people. So I want to draw your attention to the left-hand side. We have a demo site here. So this is where I'm going to demonstrate most of my items. So as you're on the demo site, this is just a pop-up modal that warns you you're on a demo site. Nothing you do here is live. No one gets notified. It's a sandbox for people to experiment in. So the limitations of the demo site is there's not a way to experiment with submitted proposal types, but there's, we think it's very helpful to just take a look at creating new items. So the first thing I'm going to show is preliminary proposals. So on the left-hand side, if you click on this drop-down button, you will see the options of all the things you can create. So I'm gonna go ahead and click Prelim. And so for myself, I belong to more than one organization. So I'm just gonna go ahead and click the organization I want to perform this action as. So this is a 3-step wizard for the prelim proposal. The first part is you have to select your funding opportunity. So as you probably noticed right away, this is a pretty short list, and it's a short list on purpose because as the same for full proposals, anytime a solicitation comes up, a feature is added, we really take a look at that list to see, is it the best time to add it to the Research.gov options? So for here, we've only added 4. So one reason you may not see a prelim on this list is if the deadline is coming up or it's in the middle of a submission. We don't want to move something over if the deadline is next week. That's not enough time for the community to get used to that and be able to use that. So these are solicitations where their deadlines are very far in advance. There may be new solicitations. So we are carefully curating this list. So these 4 are the only ones right now that you can select. So I'm going to go ahead and select the first one. And step 2 is where to apply. So most of the time, if it's a solicitation or even a PD, this will be pre-selected for you. There's not a way for you to to go outside of what the solicitation is addressed to. But sometimes, sometimes there's a drop down for programs or drop down for divisions. So in this case, there's only 1. So step 3 is a final question on whether or not you're going to be submitting as a single or you're going to be separately submitting. And just as an FYI, if you are separately submitting, I'm going to go ahead and do lead proposer. Just one thing to note, we will be automatically pre-pending text that will say this is a collaborative research. It doesn't matter if you're the lead or non-lead, we will automatically append this title to the beginning. So that is something for you to be aware of. Also, something to be aware of, Research.gov is a little less lenient on special characters and titles, so just be aware of that. You can't add things like degrees or any sort of squiggly lines, so just be aware of that. We do know that, if you notice, I just try to put an apostrophe. So apostrophes today are not allowed in the title, and we have received feedback that is problematic for a lot of people. We've heard that feedback, and we will be implementing allowing apostrophes in the near future. So that is something to just keep in mind. So I think a lot of people will be happy about that. All right. Let's see. So we are now on the homepage for the prelim proposal, and this looks almost identical to a regular full proposal, but if you notice, the required sections are slightly different. So, as you know, prelim proposals have different requirements. There's not as many documents that you need to upload, and we will accommodate that for you. I would say there is a newish or newer category called may be required. So let me just highlight this. So we know a cover sheet is required. We know a project summary is required, et cetera. But these other documents may or may not be required depending on your solicitation. At this time, the system is not going to be that customized to know whether or not your solicitation requires a data management plan. So we don't know that. We can't make that determination yet in the system. We hope this will be a feature in the future, but right now for these other sections, we're really going to rely on you, the applicant, to know whether or not, hey, I'm applying for 22534 and it requires a data management plan. To make that a little easier, we did add, so I'm just going to click on project description. We have added to almost all new types. So we're looking at a project description screen. If you look on the upper right-hand corner, almost on every upload screen, you're going to see this gray box with helpful links. And in the past, it only included the PAPG chapter links, but we've now added the funding opportunity link. So this is really useful for people who are on specific screens. let's see, if I go back, it should exist on every page. This will help people be able to go straight to that funding opportunity details without, opening a whole bunch of browsers and Googling it and things like that. So we're trying to put information that you need at the time that is relevant on the page that you're doing it. So that's a new thing. You'll see that on also regular proposals. So I just wanted to highlight that. All right. And oops. And just a reminder, if you prepare a prelim in Research.gov, you must create your full proposal in the same system. One thing I wanted to highlight is selecting due dates. So it's very different than in Fastlane, but if you look on the right-hand side on the upper corner, there is a due date. So some solicitations have just one due date. You can't change it, but of course there's many that you have to select one. You must select one. So go here and you can select a due date. One thing to keep in mind is if for some reason your solicitation gets extended. So let's say today the deadline is March 2nd, but something happens, maybe the program decides to extend it for a month. If you've already created a proposal, your proposal in progress will not automatically update. So today, I'll select March, but if tomorrow that deadline is extended, that date doesn't automatically update. You have to re-choose it. So I think that's something that's a little challenging for people. So just know that when that happens, if a deadline gets extended, always the PI or the AOR can change the due date. You have to reselect that due date to take advantage of that new extension. All right, let's see, double check on time. Any questions before I kind of touch upon the full proposal?
Yeah, we have a question. So if somebody finds a problem or some issue in Research.gov, how should they report it?
There's more than one way. So if you're having an issue with a real life proposal that you're working on, in real life, in my opinion, the best way is to call IT Hub Central. Actually, I'll take that back. Call and email IT Hub Central. So it depends on how urgent you need your issue to be resolved. I will say emailing does have a slight delay in terms of having a technician assigned to it and someone reaching back to you. But if you call, you'll get a live person. If there's a wait, you can do a callback feature. So their hours are pretty good. I think it's somewhere, I don't have it right in front of me. On weekdays, they actually close pretty late. So let's see. Let me see if I can get this for you really quickly. Even I. That is interesting.
I just put the information in the chat.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Real-time navigation here. We need to make sure ITF Central hours are up front and center so people can contact you. All right. I hope that answers your question.
The hours are 7 to 9 p.m. Eastern time.
Thank you. And if you need help that's not urgent or there's a recommendation, I was going to go through this at the end, but I'm going to go ahead and show you. If you scroll down to the bottom on the left-hand side, oh, here it is. There's a feedback button. This is where you kind of, give us our suggestions anonymously, or you can give your name. And then there's a link here to contact IT Help Central. So I hope that was helpful. And I'm going to pop back to the demo and just really quickly go to full proposals. So what I'm going to do now is select a proposal that requires a prelim, a solicitation that requires a prelim. So I'm going to go ahead and select 22534. And it's going to blow through these screens really quickly. All right, so that was very quick, but here I am. I'm in a full proposal of a proposal that requires a prelim. So I wanted to highlight to you, it looks almost identical to a regular proposal. The major difference is on the cover sheet. So I'll just go ahead and click there. So for these proposals, you're going to see a new section called Related Prelim Proposal. And this is where you would enter your proposal number for your prelim. And remember, if you started in Fastlane or submitted it in Fastlane, you can't find it here. So there is some validations. Like if I keep adding more numbers, it'll remind you it has to be 7 digits. But I'm just going to do a invalid proposal number, and I'll go ahead and click save. Sorry, I have to pick a date since that's required. So our system is going to validate whether or not your proposal is valid. Your prelim number is valid. And this is going to tell you that, and it will stop you. It will stop you only if the solicitation requires a prelim. I am aware there are solicitations that have it as an optional. If it's optional, it's not going to stop you like this. But this one in particular that I'm showing you is a required feature, and you will not be able to continue. So that is something to keep in mind. Okay. Let's see, check on time. So I'm going to go ahead and, as I mentioned before, just kind of go over some of the sections that are common in all proposal types, and just give people a little bit of a recap of things to look out for. One thing I wanted to recap is the Share Proposal and SPO AOR feature. And I just wanted to reiterate to people, by default, when you create a new item, it is not shared with your administrative officers or your SPO staff. It is only seen and viewable by the PI or the person that created it. So here you can see it is not shared. I highly recommend this as habit. When people do this, please allow access to your people, and that way they can see it. One thing I'm noticing, since I'm going to pop to manage personnel and sub-award organizations. So this is the screen where you will add PIs or senior personnel or other authorized users. So since I'm at NSF, I'm going to click on Manage Personnel. And right now, it's only me. I can add PIs. So I'll go ahead and enter the NSF IDs. You can also enter email addresses, but I prefer, just for accuracy, to just use NSF IDs. And one thing to highlight, so I entered an NSF ID, and this person is listed twice. And one thing to keep your eye on is organization. So many people, many PIs belong to more than one organization. And you have to be careful about who you're selecting and what organization they belong to. So just be aware of that. I think sometimes people are just selecting the first option, and you should just double check that. So go ahead and select the co-PI. And for your information, this works very differently than Fastlane, other authorized users. So a lot of times we get tickets where people are adding other authorized users. They either can't find that person, or they added that person can't access the proposal. And some of the most common things for the first scenario is that be aware that when you add roles to people, it's not instant. So I think that's frustrating for people. So when you add a PI, add an OAU, it could take up to 30 minutes for that role to apply. So just be aware of that time. Don't be adding PIs on the day of, 1 hour before the deadline. So that's one tip. And another one is sometimes you do add an OAU, but you still can't see them. So I'm going to go and kind of touch upon that. So I'll go ahead and add an OAU. So if you were paying attention, I added access to AORs before I added the OAU. What I believe is happening is sometimes OAUs are also part of the administrative staff. And if you're adding OAUs before you grant access to AORs, I believe there's a conflict there. I'm hearing some reports where people have to do 2 steps. They have to add the AOR and share access. So if I'm able to confirm that, we'll add that to the FAQs, but just be aware that there's 2 parts, adding people and sharing access. And depending on what they have, you might want to do both. All right, I'm going to pause here to see if there's any questions before I move on.
So we do have a question. So if you search for a person by NSF ID to add them to the proposal, and the search result returns with blank fields for name and institution, what does that mean?
So the NSF ID returns, and then there's blank names. That sounds
Correct.
familiar. That sounds familiar. So Rama, I'm going to say, if you know, if you could type in the answer. I can think of more than one reason. Oh, go ahead, Rama.
Yeah, I'll follow up with an answer in the
Okay.
in the Q&A.
Okay. My gut reaction is something has gone wrong with the institution. Sometimes an institution has duplicate IDs, and that could be one reason, but I'll let Rama take care of that. You definitely should get IT help if you see that. All right. If there's no further questions, I'm going to pop into project description because that is the most called about section. All right, so for project description, as I mentioned before, we've added the funding opportunity on the right-hand corner. And then we put a little bit of technical requirements on what you can or cannot upload. You know, there's a file max, it has to be a PDF. And one thing I would like to highlight is that URLs should not be in your project description. So this is something that's in the PAPG, and it is something that we didn't hard enforce until August of last year. And so sometimes this validation does trip people up. Let's see, let me show you what a hard validation looks like. Let's see, demo. So upload a PD that has a URL. This is what a hard stop looks like. It's in red, has an exclamation point. Your document should not have URLs. And just to elaborate on what that means, what does a URL, what does it mean? So it means two different things. One is you can't have any text in your document that begins with an HTTP, HTTPS. It cannot begin with a www.data.gov. Those will be flagged as URLs. The second criteria is something cannot actually be a URL link. So what's happening is that the text might say John Smith, but when you hover your mouse over it is an actual link that will take you to an external website. So those are a little harder to catch because visually on the screen, they don't look like URLs, but they are clickable URLs. So I would say just be careful about that. The most common places I see hidden URLs being used are citations. So if you have citations in your project description and you might be using a third-party tool, I'm aware that Google has a citation-like software. They will automatically embed hrefs, clickable links in your document. So just be very careful about that and just be aware of that. I'll pause there. Some other validations. So we did, when we rolled out in 2018, we validated fonts. Because of increased usage, we realized that their fonts were being a little problematic because although we can pretty accurately detect fonts on Microsoft Word, it's not as good in detecting fonts when people are using other software like LaTeX users. So that is a situation that we realized that we may have to reassess. So font warnings have been removed from the system until we can take a look at that. For margins, so the next most common validation errors are margin checks. So your margins must be 1 inch on each side, and people were getting on some issues with that. We are taking a closer look at that. But again, the feedback and usage of the system is what we need in order to improve that. But just touching on margins just a little bit, the most common thing I see with margin errors are pagination. Some people are still living in the FastLane world where you have to paginate. Just remember, in Research.gov, you don't have to paginate. So take out page numbers. The other thing is, just be a little careful about images. A lot of times an image will have, a dotted line and it's exceeding that margin. So just double check that. And also, if you're using a really old Microsoft Word version, the margins applied to that software is a little different than it is in a more recent software. So just be aware of those. I'm going to pause there before I want to talk about line spacing. So I do have some updates on line spacing.
We have a few questions.
Okay.
Is it not possible to show page numbers for where the error occurs?
Right now we do not.
Message.
Okay. Right now we don't show the page number. That is something we are considering if it's possible. You know, we check the entire document, and if we detect, you know, an issue, we say the entire document is, you know, needs to be looked at. I think it would be helpful to tell you what page it is. I just don't know if it's, you know, easily possible, but that is something we've heard again and again, because we need to know where the error is, right? 15 pages is a lot to look at. So that is something we are considering of adding. But if you create a ticket and you have some time before your deadline, we will be happy to take a look at it and give you that answer. So it's not something where you'll never know. If you have time, email IT Up Central, send us our document, and we can tell you what page it's on. It's just not an automatic system display. One question, are non-hyperlinked URLs allowed? No, if it begins with www.blah.com or starts with HTTP. We are scanning the text itself to see if you are trying to put a URL in there. Now, if you did //data.gov, that's not going to be flagged. So you can experiment with that. But if we
Stephanie, can I jump in there real quick?
Go ahead.
So, yeah, hi, this is Jeremy Leffler from the policy office. I just wanted to, on this issue with URLs in the project description, the point, and people should really take a look at the PAP guide for this. The point of not allowing the URLs in the project description is because it can serve as exceeding the 15-page limit. And so that is the reason why they're not allowed. So they really shouldn't be looking at ways to get around the compliance check here. We should be looking at what the reason for the policy is. So there are certain things that the system can do to prevent you from doing that. But again, the policy is that URLs are not permitted in the project description because one, they could serve to exceed the 15-page limit or whatever the page limit is for a funding opportunity, or that those pages could be altered between the time of submission and the time that reviewers see them. So just wanted to make that clear. Thanks.
Okay, thank you so much, Jeremy. All right. Julia, is there any other ones? I'm kind of glancing. Are QR codes allowable in project descriptions?
Again, this goes to what I was just saying. So QR code is just another way. I don't know what the system can do if you're putting an image of a QR code in the project description, but again, a QR code is just another way of getting to a website. So we would say that those would not be permitted.
Okay. All right. Any other questions before I kind of jump into line spacing?
We have another one.
Okay.
If there is a hidden URL link that you don't catch in the project description, will it error out before submitting?
Correct. You will get this screen. We scan the document. We scan the PDF document. If we see a hidden URL, it will appear. So sometimes it happens with citations, or maybe there was a footnote that someone removed. I've seen it like that. It's difficult. But if you have enough time, you can send in your document. We can point the page. But that's an easy way to do it. Is, for me, I actually just, low tech. I just open the document and just kind of scan my mouse through, and you can find it. That might take a while, but just, or another trick that I do is I shorten the project description and upload it, and I can find the page there if you don't want to wait for IT Up Central. But we can find out for you. But yes, hidden URLs will be caught. Okay. Let's see. So I'm going to talk a little bit about line spacing. So line spacing is a warning. It is not a hard stop. So I'm going to go ahead and upload a project description that uses Arial 10. So this is an example of a warning. It is yellow. It will not stop submission, but it might give you this message saying, hey, we're detecting that there's more than 6 lines per square inch. So there's some things I've learned in the last couple months. So if you look in the PAPG, there are 3 fonts allowed in size 10. That's Arial, Nuclear, and Palatino Linotype, I think. So our basic response to people who get this error, because remember, you will get this error. You might get this error using Arial 10, or you might get this error because you're actually trying to squeeze 8 lines in 1 inch. There is a prevalence of Arial 10 triggering the line space errors, and I'll tell you why. There's nothing wrong with the font itself. It's just that Microsoft Word or other processing software will automatically change the line spacing for the text. So let me show you how that works. So the basic response we give to people, I just want to double check, Julie can see a Word document. The first thing we always tell people at IT, okay, thank you, at IT Essential is experiment with a different size 10 font to see if it's just Arial. If you change it to Palatino Linotype, which I think is the least problematic of the 3, it will probably pass. And then you can make a decision on if you just want to change the font family or not. But what's problematic with Arial 10 is that something like Microsoft Word, if you can tell, there's a difference of spacing between these 2 lines and these lines. And especially these 2 lines. It's changing it a little bit. And it's not really a problem with the font per se. It's how the document is automatically adding this line spacing. So we have in our FAQ, it's a really easy fix, is to basically right click on the document or select everything. And there's a feature in layout that tells you the line spacing. And the best thing to do, so usually it'll default to something. Just make sure it's automatically exactly 12 points. And sometimes even selecting the whole document doesn't work. I would say focus on between the paragraphs and any text between titles and text. And so that would usually resolve the issues. But if you're at 4:50 p.m. and you're confident that it's just Arial 10 giving you these issues and you don't want to experiment with other types, I would say this is a warning and you should submit. We are taking a look at line spacing because we know that there is this, it's more prevalent for this. So we are updating our FAQs to try to address that, but hopefully we can find a solution where Arial 10 is a little more tolerated. But that is something I just want you guys to take away with. Arial 10 is okay, but sometimes your word processor is adding some spaces. That's not desirable. It's just triggering that warning, but it's just a warning. So don't freak out. All right. So I see a question on the chat on, is URL case sensitive? Because sometimes you need to enter text that contains those. I believe, Rama, you can correct me if I'm wrong, it also has to have like a .com or .org or .io. I don't think just strictly 3 Ws would create that, but that's a good question. I'll have to test that out myself. But I believe you have to have a .com or something like that. But thank you, Robert. I'll have to put that on my to-do list. Okay. All right. So if there's no further questions, I'm going to just take a look. I'm going to show something about subawardees, people, just so people are aware. And then I also want to make sure there's enough time for questions. So I always like to show something new to people. All right. So I'm here at the Managed Personnel screen, and many of you use subaward organizations. So just remember, we are on a single proposal, so this is not a collaborative. And we've been getting a lot of questions about how PIs present themselves, I guess, on the cover sheet and on the budget and things like that. And it is slightly different than FASTing. So I'm gonna go ahead and click Manage Personnel. I'm gonna just remove this guy. So when you're on this page, by default, you're only modifying your own organization. You can also add subawardees here. And you can search by organization name or DUNS number. I suggest DUNS number because that is more accurate, but you do what is comfortable for you. So I'm just gonna pick a random subaward. So a few questions we get are, this is not just limited to subawards, but also primes. Can I add a PI that's not associated with that organization? Can I have Northern Virginia Community College? Can I add a PI of someone that's not associated with NOVA? The answer is yes. So you can add PIs that are not associated with that organization. I want to jump to the budget because this is useful in terms of showing you what adding more people looks like in terms of budget and senior personnel documents. So they're here, and a lot of times people ask, well, this person for the subaward is not taking a budget, or not taking a salary. So this applies to any budget that you work with. There is this link here that I think people are missing. There's a manage button, and you can remove people completely from your budget. And so that's something that's different here. That's really easy. So if someone's not taking a salary, you can take their names off here. And one thing also is if they're taking a salary in year 2, but not year 1, unfortunately, you have to keep their name on all the years. You just put $0 on year 1 and you put an amount on on year 2. I'm going to go and print the cover sheet. Sorry, not the cover sheet, print the proposal. I just want to show you how it looks like on the cover sheet when you add a subaward. So remember, at any point, there's a print button. I encourage you to print the proposal often just to kind of look and see how that looks. So this is a proposal with a subaward. And I get some questions about order. So I just want to be transparent about how the ordering works. So in this proposal, I'm the PI. I will always be listed first because I am the PI. There's only one PI per proposal, the PI. Then you have your co-PIs. The co-PIs will be listed on your cover sheet. It is dependent on the order you add them. So as the most recent example, I added George last. And even though he's on my subaward, he will be listed second. Ash is part of my institution. She will be listed last. So that is just something to keep in mind. This may not work as desirably as people want. Again, put it in the feedback, but I just want people to be aware that the order you upload people matters. It will determine how they're displayed on the cover page. One thing also, I think people is different in Research.gov than in FastLane. So this is the budget. So as you can see, this is NSF. You see my name, you see Ash's name. One thing to note for subawardees, principal investigator, this field is blank. That is on purpose because they're not the principal investigator. I am. Stephanie Yee is the principal investigator. So in FastLane, I do believe they will put George's name in this field. So just know that is a difference of how this is being printed. So I don't want people to be surprised by that. That is on purpose. Okay. Any questions about that before I jump into senior personnel documents? And I'll try to wrap this up.
I have a question.
Yes.
That I'd like to direct to Rama. So when will the search move from DUNS to the unique entity identifier in Research.gov?
That will be in February. So starting February, towards the end of February, users will start to search by UEI and not done in PSM.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions, Julia? I do see one question.
When you were showing the,
Oh, go ahead.
go ahead, you go ahead.
Oh, it's a quick one. So I have a question about 10 megabytes seems a little small for project description. If you think so, I would put that in the feedback comments, but I will say just from looking at tickets, it's not, I've never seen, I think, okay, I'll take that back. I have seen one ticket where someone had a proposed project description greater than 10 megabytes. So considering we get, get a lot of proposals, thousands, and only one has said their project description was too large, I would say the majority of people don't hit that mark, but we'll consider that. I don't want to just preemptively up that because it could impact performance, because remember reviewers have to see this proposal too in the back end. You don't want them to be waiting for this. So there are ways to optimize images, but it sounds like most people are making it work. And Julia, you were about to say something.
Yes, when you were showing the budget, are there any templates for the budget that people can upload and work offline?
No. There is now any plans to have a downloadable budget for people to upload. I do know Fastlane did provide this capability, but to be honest, it often breaks and doesn't work very well. And the reason is people have a million and one different kinds of software to modify an Excel document, and those don't really do well. So at this time, the budget, unlike Fastlane is very static. It doesn't give you any feedback. Our budget is just 10 times easier to use. I'll pop in there for a second, Oh, just remember, you can hide the menu so you can get more horizontal real estate. It's just a lot easier. It's a lot nicer. It gives you real-time messages. It adds it up for you. It'll validate. So, if you add postdoc people, it'll tell you need to upload a document. So it's smarter. It's looking at other business rules that's outside of budget. So I don't think people would gain a lot with a downloadable document, to be honest. But if you really think it will help you, put it in the feedback. But right now, I just think the features you get from a live web form is far exceeding something you would gain from a downloadable form. Taking a look at some questions really quickly. Let's see. I'm going to answer this question from Teresa live. So your question is, understanding that line spacing is a warning and won't stop submission, will the proposal be returned without review? So IT Help Central's response and my response will always be the same. We don't know what program officers are doing on compliance check in addition to what the systems are doing. I cannot tell, they could be using some other software or they're measuring. In my opinion, Arial 10 is not going to result in a return without review because the line spacing, it's just that our line checks are very strict and maybe it needs to be adjusted a little bit for just the Arial 10. What we can't see and what IT Help Central cannot see is, as I mentioned before, you get that warning even if you have a true terrible violation on page 10. We can't tell that, so, and we don't want to tell you, hey, it's okay, submit it, because what if on page 15 you had something that truly violates that line? That warning is just to help you, even though it might alarm you. It's just to help you, hey, we see something that's triggering something that you should take a second look at. If you're confident it's only Arial 10 and you experiment with the other fonts and they work fine and you just are in love with Arial 10, I would submit it. I would submit it. we just can't tell you what the program officers are going to do. I will tell you they do not see the warning messages that you see. Okay. Any other questions, Julia? I know there's a lot, but I can't. There's a lot of them that, let's see.
We're going through them. If you want to move on, we'll come back.
Okay. You guys take a look at that and I'll come back. I want to highlight some things on the senior personnel documents. So I think one more powerful feature for administrators, especially, is to take a look at senior personnel documents and to see whether or not you have everything there. In Fastlane, I think it's not all in one place. This is where you should go. So let me navigate here in case people missed it. I'm on the home page. I'm clicking senior personnel documents. Senior personnel documents will show you everybody that you need documents for. So there's an expand all and collapse all. So these are my 3 people. There's a subaward. I'm going to expand them all. Expanding them all will help you glance and scroll down this page to see who am I missing documents for. So it's a really easy way for you to just make sure your compliance check. Just to note, you guys probably already know this, BioSketch and current pending support, those requirements and those formats have changed as of October 2021. BioSketch is now 3 pages versus before it's 2 pages. Just our number one calls right now around these 2 documents is just people still using the older formats. So just make sure that the PDF that you're getting from your people is using the 22-1 and not the 20-1. So for fillable PDFs, you'll see a date at the upper left-hand corner. The easiest way for me to find out if they're using an old format is just to right-click on the document in Acrobat and just to see the title. The title will say 20-1 or it'll say 22-1. So I would say that's the easiest way to see if you're using an older document. And let's see, current passport. And something that we've implemented new, some of you may have not heard about this yet, is the fillable current and pending support document is pretty long, and most of the time people do not fill up all those spaces. We have introduced an automatic trimming feature. So basically what that means, this only is for current and pending support, is that if you have a big, large document and then there's a lot of empty pages, we will automatically trim those pages for you. So I'm going to upload this document that has tons of missing pages. When you upload that and take a look at the document again, we have trimmed those pages. So if you notice, it used to be 27, but now you only see 3. So this will significantly reduce the size of your proposal and not have a lot of blank pages. So that is something that is new. Any questions on that before I kind of touch on COA documents, because that is something that people call about. Okay, double check on time, trying to wrap up. All right, so for COA documents, as you know, there is a template on the policy website. So some of the major issues that I'm seeing are, 1, people are not using the most up-to-date templates. We haven't updated the template in quite a while, so most likely you do have the latest template, but just double check that. We do have a link here to the template, so it's just easy to take a look to see if that is the latest document. The second most problematic thing I've seen is people upload a document, but when they preview it, it's blank. I can show that to you really quickly. So I'm going to upload an Excel document. And look, there's all these funny looking blank documents. You can upload it. And you get this warning that we detect some of the cells could not be saved. And if you click it open, it's completely blank. So there's 2 reasons why this usually happens. 1, I see more than the other. So 1 is that people are putting invalid dates in the date field. So in the date, sometimes a lot of people put text in there. They write out the word January, or they write out the word present. Just make sure you're adhering to all the data fields and the validations for that. So in that document, there are drop-down fields. Make sure you use those drop-downs. Don't enter your own field. Make sure the dates are in the right field. Usually it's just that. It's just formatting of that proposal. The second thing I'm seeing are people cutting and pasting with formatting. So what's happening are people might be sharing this document on Google Drive and then they try to put it back to Excel. That's not going to work. You have to, keep it to that Excel document. Don't share it. Just modify that. And if you have a lot of people on your COA document, I highly recommend that you upload that document incrementally. Don't add 300 people and try to upload that, and then you have this arduous task of finding out which one is causing the problem. Sometimes special characters, foreign characters can cause a whole document to explode. So just be cognizant of that and make sure special characters are not allowed. But one feature we do have that's better than Fastlane is, I believe, I even use this to troubleshoot Fastlane COA documents, is that we give better validation errors. So if you see this, we're trying to tell you which table, which column, which row has an issue and what is the problem. So for this one, table 1, column 1, row 17 must be blank. So I think this is pretty specific. So just, take a look at it. It's a pretty powerful tool. All right, Julia, do you have any questions before I kind of mention quickly the changes to project description and also our help? Okay.
Yeah, so on the budget page, the PI and co-PI senior personnel are being listed alphabetically, which makes it seem like the first person listed is the PI. Will this be updated in the system as part of the updates? I'm sorry, corrected in the system as part of the updates.
So you mean on this page? Because Stephanie Yee is not before Ash Marshall. But if you're saying co-PIs, I actually don't know if, okay. I'm going to put that note because I don't know the answer. I don't know if it's alphabetical. On the cover sheet, listing on the cover sheet itself, it's by order you add them. But for budget, I was not aware there was a different order. So I'm gonna have to get back to you on that as something to take a look at. Any other questions, Julia, that you can see?
Yes. Is there a way to save collaborators so we can reuse this data instead of recreating this document over and over?
Okay, so you work with 2 people all the time. Is there a way to save that? Not at this time. I think maybe you're alluding to maybe a copy feature. It would be nice to copy some of the guts of other proposals to new ones. There's not a plan to do that, but that's an interesting idea. But no, there's not a way to save collaborators, so you can copy that information over. Any other questions? I'm going to peek really quickly on project descriptions. So I'm going to start showing you a project description that exceeds 15 pages. I just want to be real quick about it. Any other questions while I'm navigating, Julia?
No questions on the navigating.
Okay. All right. So really quickly,
there was a follow-up about the budget printout, about the PIs and co-PIs being listed alphabetically. So this is on the budget printout page for the listing of the PIs.
Okay. So let me.
And I know you said we can get back to it, but I just thought if.
So my answer for Laura D. Davison is, do you mean people from number 2 onwards or just this page? Because the principal investigator will always be first. And Stephanie Yee is not alphabetically before Ash Marshall. But I'm assuming this is the budget printout page you're referring to. But let me know in the chat if this is not your question. But I will get back to you on this. I'll double check. Okay. All right, so really quickly, we've enabled the ability to upload project descriptions that exceed 15 pages. So really quickly here, even though I uploaded a 69-page project description, what I wanted to point out is that we are reading the page limit requirements for the solicitation and presenting that to you as an error message. So this is different than what you're used to seeing. Your file can actually 20 pages. So 20 pages is the limit for this solicitation. All right. Back. One thing I want to highlight before I go back to the presentation, I know we're getting kind of late, is your help. So we are aware that our help is not as helpful in terms of navigation, but I just want to show you what it looks like now so you get a better idea of how to orient yourself. We do have plans to make this a little easier for people. So as you notice on the upper right-hand corner, we have a help and about. The help takes you to something that looks like this. So unfortunately, this help that you see here has everything except proposal submission. So if you are someone that needs help on project reporting or cash withdrawals, this is the help that you want to take a look at. If you're doing proposal submission, that's not going to be helpful to you. It's going to be in the about section. And this is not intuitive, we realize this, but I just wanted to get people familiar with these links. The about pages will have a link or references to all the modules in Research.gov, so you can learn more about account management, or you can learn more about notifications and requests. There's a link here to proposal submission, and we are constantly updating. This is where you need to go in terms of if you have new staff, you want to do training, or you just want to get familiar with the system. We have on the left-hand side all your FAQs. So for example, everything that I mentioned about error messages and how to overcome them, they're here. We have lots of information about things we've learned over time. And we also have links and how-to guides. So there's how-to guides and video tutorials. So this is a huge resource for information, and we're constantly updating it. So that is something I want to make sure people are aware of. And as I mentioned also, feedback, we need the feedback. And so I'm hoping you're starting to realize now why it's so important for people to use the system early rather than wait till January. When we started to force people to use Research.gov, we discovered all these things, or we learned all these things. We learned things about people's software or how they're using the system. We're not going to know this if people don't use the system, and we can't fix it for you if we don't know about it. So that's why it's important. Even if you're still a little hesitant, play around with the demo system. Tell us what you think. Tell us if something is not working. This is how we can make the system better. So that is my plea to people who have not, fully converted. It is easy to use. It's really wonderful. So it's really important that people just get familiar with it as soon as possible. All right, it is 12:14. I think we can start tackling questions and comments in the Q&A. So let me take a look, please. Let's see. So I know David's typing an answer about, what can we do about not recreating documents over and over again. That's why we're moving to Research.gov. There's this beautiful vision that we have that, as time goes on, when you log in to create a proposal, we will have all these wonderful documents you can reuse and just modify for that proposal. We can't do that without modernizing. So, Fastlane is very inflexible. We can't do all this cool, neat stuff. So that's why we want people to use Research.gov so we can start using and doing this cool, neat stuff. We can't get to the cool, neat stuff yet without getting the basics done. So that's what we're doing now. So right now, just think of it as, I keep mentioning December 2022. That's not the end. That's the end of getting core functionality over. After that, we're going to start getting into the nice to haves, the things that will make people's lives easier. So this will be a continuous process. You'll see me a lot more often, even beyond December, of things that we can improve. Let's see, any other questions? full transition to Fastlane to Argov. I don't have a date, but as you know, Fastlane has a lot more other stuff than proposal submission. I will say definitely not for at least a year, and I'll tell you why. And that's because, you know, if you submit a proposal on Fastlane December 1st, 2022, you may still have to do things to it, right? You may still have to do a budget revision, you know, when it's reviewed 6 months later. You might have to, you know, do a PFU. You might have to do things like that. You will still have the ability to do your business if you submitted a proposal in Fastlane on December 2022. So it will still live on, but that is things that have already been submitted. And if you're familiar with the Fastlane interface, there's other awards out there. We have our review system. Ad hoc reviewers use Fastlane. Those are all very large modules that have their own unique end dates. So there's just so many, I can't give you a date on that. But yes, we are trying to decommission all the modules as soon as possible. Any other questions? Yes. So it sounds like URL is a hot topic. I just encourage you guys to send feedback on the feedback forums or just send me emails. I think, you know, there's still a lot to learn to know how people are using URLs. And, you know, I think it's a straightforward requirement, but maybe not. So, you know, Fastlane does not enforce it, but we are enforcing it. So that's raising a lot of good questions. Okay. So one question. So Caitlin, I don't quite understand your question about the ERA and the papers. So if you can just contact me directly, that would be great. So I'm gonna send you my email. Any other questions or something you want to see? I hope this was helpful to you. And thank you. If there's no more questions, I'm going to pause, make sure my panelists has anything to say. Okay, I'm going to stop my share and just pop back into the presentation. Okay, so just really quickly back to the presentation. Everything I talked about are on these other slides. So just make sure you take a look at those. All the links are here. So nothing new here, but it's just letting you know they're in the slides. So in case you need to share this with your colleagues. Okay, and here is the IT Help Central hours. Any other questions or comments? And if not, I'll just hand it back over to David.